Sometimes people make a confusion between being strategic and being mature.
Yeah.
Being strategic is a matter of alignment. You tell me that you have strategic pains, I will provide you strategic services, but if I'm doing that very well or not, that is about maturity.
Yeah.
So maybe you can be very strategic, I'm supporting the portfolio, but doing something that you should be ashamed of. No maturity, you know what I'm saying?
Coming right at you. The PM Cowboy Podcast.
Hi, this is your PM Cowboy, and we have an amazing guest with us this time. We always have great guests, but we have project management royalty in the house today, okay? Many of you people will recognize him probably far better than you recognize me as the humble PM Cowboy. But I also hope that I can get this new guest out to all of those of you who are working in project management offices or whatever you call it, okay? Business excellence, operational excellence, whatever the name might be, value delivery office. I'm here with the #1 proponent for PMOs in the world. And I don't say that lightly. I've done a lot of research in the last couple of years on what organizations are out there. I've been following Americo Pinto, by the way, he'll introduce himself in just a moment. I've been following him for a while. I've been following some other organizations, but I didn't really know him. And I had the great pleasure of seeing him for the first time live at an event from PMI Chapter Austria, my old hunting grounds. And I was blown away, which is not easy. Okay, I was blown away. He was loquacious. He knew what he was saying. It resonated with me for the first time. I'm like, God, this guy doesn't just speak my language. He's several steps ahead of me, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. We're going to be talking today about PMOs and everything that have to do with it, and what Americo Pinto is doing with his great initiatives with PMI. He'll go into some detail with that. And this should be a great inspiration for somebody. So, Americo, welcome and thank you. This says a lot about you. I reached out to you when I found out you were coming to Vienna, and I said, hey, you're in Vienna. Yeah. I would have never dared to ask you otherwise, but if you're going to be in Vienna, will you come on my podcast? And he didn't hesitate for a second.
Of course.
Okay. So, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for your kind words, right? So, it's a great opportunity to be here with you so we can talk a little about PMOs and what's coming up. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of new things coming up in the next few months. So actually, today I'm the managing director of PMO Global Alliance at PMI. So I'm part of the PMI senior leadership team, and I'm leading the PMI's PMO community. That is PMO Global Alliance, PMOJ, exactly, right? So actually PMOJ was an independent organization that was acquired by PMI at the end of 2023. And then from that moment, it became this global community of PMOs for PMI, and I have the privilege of leading it. And now, under PMI umbrella, we can do much more than in the past, right?
Definitely look out for, definitely go onto the PMI website. There's a lot of information on there.
Absolutely.
What we always kind of like to do at the beginning of a podcast is when I look at podcasts, I'm always interested in the subject matter, but I also want to know who the person is.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think so many people have probably seen you on stage before, and they're amazed by what you have to say, but they don't really know the person.
Oh, yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about your background? You were telling me a little bit about that beforehand, so that people can kind of get a gauge on you. Who are you? What do you stand for?
Absolutely. So I was born in Brazil, mm-hmm. in Rio. I still live in Rio. And so that's where my family is. And in the beginning of my career, I started in the consulting area, in the big companies. This is the official start, because before that, I told you that between 15 years old and 22 years old, I had another job. I was a professional actor in Brazil. So movies, plays, and some TV. But at that time, with 22 years old, I decided to retire, right? And I started my career initially in Accenture, then in Deloitte. So after a few years, I left and I found my first company from the scratch in Latin America. Then a little later, another one. And finally, in 2017, I sold my company. We were like 600 people at that time.
Oh, wow.
And I sold the company to...
Doing project management consulting or broad
and
consulting?
IT and project management. But at that time, I sold the company to one of the big consulting companies, international consulting companies, and that was the moment that I said, okay, what can I do now, right? And I have a very good experience in terms of communities because I'm a member of PMI for 26 years, right? So half of my life, literally. I started when I was a baby.
26 years for me as well.
Exactly.
1999,
so you know what I'm talking about. I started when I was really young, and it's something that made a big difference in my life. I co-founded Rio chapter in 1999. I all this time I've been a very active volunteer, and what really amazed me is the power of collaboration. You know, how together as volunteers we can do fantastic things. And that's why in 2017 I found PMOGA from the scratch. So PMOGA, PMO Global Alliance, was I could say the first community of PMOs in a global perspective. And sorry, and we started to grow very fast.
What was your motivation to start? I mean, I know you remember that back in the day, PMI had special interest groups, but I don't think there was ever a special interest group for PMOs, was there?
Actually, there was one, very big, yeah. But PMI, I don't know exactly why, but by 2016, 2017, PMI just closed all interest groups, and then there was not a PMO group anymore. So the official event that was a big one that usually happened in the US also stopped. So then the pandemic came. PMI was out of the PMO landscape. So there was a big gap because PMO people, they are not project managers, right? There are many differences in terms of challenges, objectives, competences. The life is totally different. Some people make a confusion and believe that because there is a P of project is the same thing, but definitely it's not. So PMOGA was very well received by the community, and very, very quickly, in like 2 years, 3 years, we were 10,000 people in almost 100 countries.
Wow.
With many, many projects.
I didn't realize it was that many countries.
It was crazy how things, happen so fast. And we started to develop many projects, research, events, the awards, many great...
I remember you had...
the PMO Global Awards that became the largest one in the world. It started in 2018. So actually, everything was going very well. So then in 2023, we were around 30,000 people, more than 150 countries. And PMI came. When I say came, we have been always together. Right?
The door was never closed.
I was like a cousin, but PMI came in the beginning of 2023, and during 1 year we start to discuss how could we work together in a kind of partnership or something like that. So in the end of 2023, we decided for an acquisition, and then PMOGA in 2024 became the PMI's global community of PMOs. So PMOGA now is not a company
We talked
anymore.
about this beforehand. By the way, anybody who has anything to say in PMI, Pierre, anybody else, a stroke of brilliance. I think it's a stroke of brilliance, number one, because like you said, the PMO community is essential.
Yeah,
it is
absolutely.
an essential part of the DNA of the what I call project program portfolio management. It needs to be included. It's its own thing, but it needs to be included. And some of the most important personas in the stakeholder landscape, and also the ones who drive project management governance, standardization, training, standards, all that kind of stuff. So it definitely, I think it was just an oversight. I think it kind of slipped. They had so many other things they were doing, they missed it. And what I love about the fact that you guys did this collaboration, I was really stunned when I saw it, was it reminded me of the old and still present culture of PMI, of inclusivity. PMI doesn't have to invent everything. If people do good things, think global but act local, you use something that started local and became international. PMI was still very much bigger, but they graciously took you under their umbrella, and I think that's a stroke of brilliance, and I'm looking forward to more of that in going in that direction.
Absolutely, and you mentioned something important. When we talk about being global, when I started, it wasn't a coincidence that the name was PMO Global Alliance. So I was in Brazil, but actually since the very beginning, it wasn't about Brazil. It was about the planet. And so we were very focused on this, spreading the word, around the globe. And this is something very important, because when we talk about a community, no one should be left behind. Of course, there will be some regions that are more mature, more evolved, but there are many regions that need us a lot, need us experienced professionals, so we can help a lot. And this is the spirit, because maybe it's not a place for business, a good business, but it's important, because in the medium term, the long term, everything connects, so.
And when we were sitting in the car together, you mentioned not a lot of people would expect something like your organization to come from below the equator.
True.
Or around the equator. And I thought it was such a funny statement. But I think you're correct. It's we've been long waiting for this. The world is a global playground, and innovation can come from anyone and from anywhere. And I think this whole concept of hey, you're theoretically, Brazil is a huge economy. This concept about you're a developing country or whatever it is, I think is hogwash. I think if we really, and I think it's also part of the growing process for PMI that originally started in the United States. It still has a lot of its American DNA, but it's also a global company.
Absolutely.
And it has to embrace, and you can see if you look at the people who are on the board and yourself, PMI is embracing that internationality, and I think it's great. And I think there's a lot of other continents, for example, Africa, that will become more and more dominant also in the PMI, and I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely, and this is exactly the point. When I said that idea of below the equator line is because usually it's most of these initiatives, they started in the richest countries, Western Europe, US. So, but the fact that PMI acquired PMOGA, a company that was founded in Brazil, a global one, but founded in Brazil, it means a lot. It means that first, PMI is open for what we are doing as a community. I'm a member, as anyone else. And these great initiatives, if they are good, if they are ethical, they can be recognized. It can be me in Brazil or anyone else in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in the US. So it shows, for me, it shows a lot. It shows that, hey, we see what's happening, and when it's something that can really contribute to the community, come on, be with us.
For those of our viewers who are saying, okay, I've never heard of the PM Cowboy, but I'm looking at this for the first time. Maybe I hope you've heard from America, but if you haven't, they might be asking themselves a question. Okay, I'm working in a PMO. What does this new initiative from PMI, actually an older initiative that is now under the umbrella of PMI,
exactly.
What do we have in store? Because you have lots of great things planned.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So many. So now in February, PMI launched its first publication on PMOs, the first one, that is the PMO Practice Guide. So this guide brings something really, really interesting, that is a new framework named PMO Value Ring. It's something that started to be developed at PMOGA before the acquisition. It was a kind of methodology, then it was improved, extended in the last 2 years, reviewed, leveraging the huge PMI community. And now we have a full framework, really powerful, And that's what people find in the new PMO Practice Guide. That is where the new PMI PMO CP PMO Certified Professional Certification.
I'm applying this year.
Exactly. A gold standard PMI certification is grounded on this guide, right? So these are two great news, for the PMO community. Hundreds of people participated in the development of this material, of this guide. So I'm very proud of the results. And there is a lot of new things
Before
coming
we
up.
get into the, I definitely want to
Yeah.
get, but I saw your presentation yesterday, and you had a very refreshing take on the wording. You called it a practice guide, and you kind of, some people who are familiar with PMI say, so it's another pen book.
Yeah, standards.
Yeah, and would you care to share with our viewers your take on what's different? What is your approach? Very refreshing. What's your concept of? You also talked about how you intend to refresh it and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So for the listeners, by the way, I've only looked at it a little bit, but I've looked at a lot of different books on PMO, and I've told you this as well. Hats off. You said it yourself. It's still a work in progress. But for it being a work in progress, it is an amazing starting point. I think anybody who's an experienced project manager will recognize some of their thought process, but it'll challenge you as well. And what I love about it, I don't think anybody who looks at this practice guide is going to say, this is a baby in its diapers. It needs a lot of work. It might need work, but it's a great starting point. But we can get into it. Go ahead.
As anything, it can be improved, of course, and that's what we're doing. But the point that you mentioned, actually, what we have a practice guide, not the PMO book, right? A standard. Actually, in the very beginning of our discussions, and they started years ago. I'm talking about 2012, 2013, even before PMOGA. Actually, we realized something very interesting, because if you take everything that we have today in terms of standards, in terms of books about PMOs, I have all of them, I'm crazy for books, actually each one propose PMOs in a different way, right? Sometimes models of PMOs like, there are 3 types of PMOs, 5 types of PMOs, different names, new ideas like the value management office. There are many. From time to time, there is something new, right? And when we talk about all of them, we say, okay, so if they are so different, which one is the right one, right?
What's the right way?
Which one should I follow? That's the big question, right? And what we realized, based on the real world, is that you don't need to follow anyone, but you need to understand everyone. So it means that PMOs are different, and they should be different.
Use the example of trees yesterday, which I thought was great.
Exactly. So it means that standards usually, they tell you how something should be. But honestly, we cannot tell you how your PMO should be. I have no idea about
we can give you ideas.
Your company, but we can tell you how you should think to get there. So it means that you think in this way, you will find your output, your outcomes, And that's what the guide talks about. It was created based on the experience of many PMO leaders, hundreds of PMO leaders, and that's when that idea of trees came up, because I usually say that our volunteers, PMO leaders, seasoned PMO leaders, they are like trees, beautiful trees, thriving trees, They are definitely really beautiful as a tree in a big forest. But there is one problem. Each one is a tree, and each one can see only themselves, So they believe they are the best tree
Center
in the
of the
forest,
universe,
the most beautiful tree. And I'm not saying that they are wrong. I'm saying that there are other trees. And if they try to be like that one, it won't work, right? So we have many trees, working in the development of this guide and these proposals. But what is really interesting is that we work it in a way, that was one of my roles, to go up and try to see the
Bird's eye
forest.
view.
Because when we see the forest, we can see things that trees, they cannot realize that. You know, like, okay, what is the critical points that maybe can make this trees a little more beautiful than those ones, you know, like it's because they are close to the water. Maybe they can't realize that
the earth is different,
you know. Exactly, they don't know. They are tree, and that's what happens with all these books, all these standards. They are really valuable, they are really good, but instead of understanding that you have to take one of them and follow them, what you have to do is to understand all of them, because it will let you create your own solutions, and the guide will help you with that in this way of thinking.
I think when I heard that, it resonated so deeply with me, because I've also struggled with this sometimes in my own perspective. I think also being a consultant for PMOs, I sometimes catch, and I'm sure you've done this in the past, you know how you'll come into an environment and you'll sense it, right? And then you'll start having visions of what they could, and you start talking, and you can see how there's a spark of interest in your partner's, the person you're talking to's thing, and you can see how that it starts flickering a little because they're getting confused, and you're like going and you're doing, you know, like, and you could do this and you could do that, and then you have to, you mentioned the fact, and then you should be close to the board, and they're like, that's not going to happen, right? So what I love about this concept is there's certain elements about trees that are good to know. There's something that's important about the whole community and the bird's eye view. But the concept of it's good to be your own tree, and even if you're the same type of tree, you'll still grow differently based on your context. I think it's a little bit maybe upsetting for some of you to say, but listen, I want a more deterministic way. I don't want to have to deal with complexity or ambiguity. Just tell me the way it is, damn it. Give me step 1, step 2, step 3. And the beautiful message actually is it's much more dynamic than that, but there's still something that can be learned and passed on. It just requires a little bit more cognitive,
absolutely,
and an individual and not deterministic kind of thing.
This is an important point, because there will be, your tree will be different from any other tree. It's unique,
and it should be.
It can be a mature tree. It can be a young tree. It can be a tree that is flourishing. It can be a tree with some difficulties. The idea behind the guide is you have to think, right? So if you are looking for templates, just a step by step that you will automatically follow, that's not the job of a PMO leader. PMO leaders, they need to think. They need to rethink, you know, sometimes. So if you believe too much that something in a PMO should be like this or like that, maybe it's time to ask more questions before giving more answers, you know, because PMOs can be very different. Even if you are very experienced as a consultant or as a PMO leader, we have to take care, because actually, our experience can influence us to understand that all trees are like that, you know?
In psychology, they warn psychologists not to project onto their patients.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they say, I hear what you're saying, but it's about me, and I'm going to project what my experiences are. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the? You just made me think of something. Many years ago, I used to play with this term. Do you know who the concept or the fable of Johnny Appleseed?
No,
I want to culturally pass it on to you. Johnny Appleseed, I don't know if he actually, I think there's a historical person that kind of, it was somebody who was famous in the northeast of the United States during the colonial times, okay? And he used to live out in the wild, and he was famous, he was in love with apples and apple trees. And what he would do is he would, all throughout the northeastern United States, he would plant apple trees, and that's what he lived from. That was his passion, kind of like your passion is PMOs or trees. And he would sell them, and he would often sow the seed, and sometimes he would take care of the tree, sometimes he wouldn't take care of it, but that was his passion. If I may say, you are in your role as an icon and a servant leader to the community. Absolutely. You're kind of a Johnny Appleseed, and I applaud that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you there was another part that in your presentation, a lot of things resonated with me, but you talked about maturity, and the reason I thought it was interesting is because because my team and I are working on a maturity model, and we were looking at all the different maturity models, and my recognition of maturity models is they're all very similar, kind of self-explanatory in many ways, but complex in how do you make it really work. You were talking about, I think, a typical classical management approach when looking at what we're doing. Are we doing a good job? Can we talk about ourselves, and can we promote ourselves? Do we provide value? It's this concept of how mature are we? And you kind of had also an interesting analogy about maturity, because maturity is also a relative concept.
Absolutely.
Based on what you need. Yeah. Would you care to share your thoughts where that's concerned?
First of all, the guide brings two concepts that are very important: maturity and alignment.
Yeah.
So alignment means you are doing what you are supposed to do,
regardless of maturity.
So yeah, exactly. So in terms of services that your PMO is providing, I usually say that you have customers in a customer-centric approach. That's what the guide defends. You have customers, executives, project managers, functional managers, and they have pains, right? And we have to heal them with medicines, and these medicines is exactly what we will do, the services that we will provide. Methodologies, portfolio management, training, mentoring. There are many medicines, but they are proper for each kind of need, of pain. So this is alignment, because I can give someone the best medicine in the world for headache, but if this person has a pain in the stomach, there is no value. They want to recognize the value of what you are doing. So this is the first point. Okay, now I know what I have to do. So now we will talk about maturity, because maturity for a PMO is how good you are when you are providing that specific service. For example, we are providing methodology. I'm doing that in my company, we're doing that in our company. In my company, there is a methodology, but nobody used that, nobody was trained, so the adoption rate is low. If I ask the project managers, they hate the methodology. Yeah. You know, in your company, everyone...
It might be a great methodology, but if nobody wants it, then...
Exactly. Yeah. The quality of the medicine is bad. It's the right medicine, but it's bad. Yeah. In our company, everyone is trained, all projects adopted the methodology, people like it. Of course, the chances of generating the outcomes, so that your chances to heal the pain will be much higher than mine, you know? And this is the point. So maturity means if I'm doing well, what I'm doing. But the point is, doing very well, something that is not aligned, is a waste of money, resources, time, right? Nobody will see the value of what you're doing.
You used the famous Peter Drucker quote yesterday.
Exactly.
Nobody needs you to do efficiently what nobody needs you to do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you feel very frustrated because you say, oh, how nobody can see the beauty of what I'm doing? Because beauty as value is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. So you used a great analogy, and I'd love to get it on film, because we will read all sorts of academic books that have this attempt to be intellectual, and it'll stimulate us, and we'll think deep thoughts. But sometimes the things that break the ice or break that barrier, that cognitive barrier, are analogies. You know, your analogies of trees was great. I can tell that you have an acting background because you understand what has impact.
Absolutely.
But you also used the analogy of the car yesterday. Do you want to share that with me when it comes to maturity?
Yes, it's interesting.
I think that's a great. You need to listen to this because this is great.
Yeah, it's about another concept that we brought in the guide that is named perception of value, because all the time we talk about the idea that PMOs should generate value, but the first point is what does value mean to you? Yeah, that's an interesting concept that we also included in the guide, that is the concept of perception of value. So value is something that every PMO is looking for. We talk about PMO value all the time, but the first question is, what does value mean to you, to your customers, to your company? It will be different from time to time, right? So, for example, some companies maybe will be interested, or some customers, in the ROI. It's like the logical response. But we know that in other situations, like a government, they want to be reelected.
Right? Or even if you talk about NGOs, I did some work a long time ago for UNIDO. They have different. They focus more on the SDGs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's more than the numbers, you know. So this is the first point, and we need to have this value that we are delivering, recognize it. It's not only about showing the numbers. Our customers should say, hey, yes, I see that. What I'm saying is, if you ask your executive, for example, do you believe that our PMO is valuable for you? Maybe he or she will say, yes, I believe on that. And you will ask, okay, but why? Maybe they will say, I don't know why. I cannot explain, but I feel that, you know. I don't want to leave without you, you know. So that's what we are looking for. And the point is, this perception of value is something that is strongly impacted by the maturity of your customers, right? And that's when the example came. Imagine that we have two people here, an adult and a 3-year-old child. And I have two options for them as a gift. The first option is a real Ferrari. The car, the keys are here, they can take it. The other one is a Ferrari, but it's a remote control toy, right? So if I ask the adult, probably the adult will say, okay, I want a real Ferrari, right? He can see the value of a real Ferrari. If I ask the child, it's very possible that the child says, I want the toy, right? And even if you say, but come on, the real Ferrari is much more valuable, he will say, no, but I want the toy. That's what I want. That's what make me happy.
Wonderful metaphor.
You know, we know that the Ferrari is much more valuable, but they can't see that yet, you know? And this is the point, because it's not about pushing the value that we believe that exists. It's how can we nurture this customer to make them see by themselves.
What I love about this metaphor is I don't think we need, one of the things that annoys me about maturity models is this concept of I'm better, you're worse. And I think that's the inappropriate way to look at it. Because quite honestly, the child is not better or worse than an adult. And for any of you who ever dreamed about having a Ferrari is not that much fun. Not that I've had one, but I have friends. So for some people, it's the right car.
Sometimes they don't need that. It's too much. Them
joy. Other people would say the insurance, the contracts I have with Ferrari, I can't sell it. There's all sorts of stipulations that I can't change the paint color.
Absolutely.
And that kind of stuff. So. Because, you know, quite honestly, I think most people, most companies would probably be happy, as you said beforehand, also with an economy car because it suits their needs. And quite honestly, if your company, and it's beautiful being a 3-year-old, so embrace it. If you're a company, and it's not a judgment of saying you're immature. If your company is at a stage where it's more like the 3-year-old child, and you have joy, expressive joy in driving the remote control Ferrari, God bless you.
Yeah, it's about the optimal level of maturity, and it can change over time. So today, the best option is economy car. It's better than walk on foot, you know. And there is something important that is, when we talk about children, right? Let's imagine, for example, our executives, the C-level. We suppose that they are adults in our topics, right? But many times it's not true. They are children. They are great in the business. But
they're adults in their topics.
Exactly, but not in our topic.
Yeah.
But they will never tell us that. They will never say, oh, I don't know what you are talking about. No. So we have to understand what is behind the behaviors. You know what I'm saying? And respect that, because it's something that you can of course, you can manage, but it's not pushing what you believe that should be done.
You're touching upon a really important topic about is not just creating a PMO and understanding the processes and the services, but also understanding the game, the power game that's behind it. I don't mean it in a Machiavellian sort of way, but that's a factor that you have to come. Because I think we talked about this beforehand as well, is that a lot of PMOs, you know, are passionate in what they do. But the question is, have they aligned their medicine with the patients? Okay. So that's part of it. And are they ready for it? I'll give you an example. My wife, she does street medicine. She's a practicing doctor. And she understands this when she meets a homeless person. She might not see, or she might see, or she might assume that this person has serious issues. They might have frostbite. They might have lice. They might have all sorts of other things. But one of the things she's experienced psychologically is that she'll never break through to them if she just says, here, let's take off all your clothes and let's go for the big stuff, because there's no trust. Absolutely. She says, sometimes the best thing that you can do is she says, hey, listen, do you want a cigarette? She doesn't smoke, but she'll offer him a cigarette. That opens the door. Or she'll say, you know what? You're sleeping on the street. You want some earplugs. So it's the easy entry point that she uses. And then when she builds trust, she just hangs out with them. She spends time with them. And then they say, you know what, by the way, I have this thing on my back. Do you mind taking a look at it? So that's an analogy of how I think PMO bosses need to have more understanding. I'll give you one last story because it so ties in. It's a story I've told a couple times. I once consulted for a large telecom company that spent millions rolling out a project management governance model over all of their subsidiaries. Great initiative. And I was impressed. They had a portfolio manager, which I'd never, was one of the first times I'd seen. They had a PMO and a portfolio manager. And I remember the portfolio manager once came to me. He was kind of a cut and dry kind of guy. He came to me and he was totally frustrated. He says, I just came back from a retreat with the board and I'm totally frustrated. I said, why are you frustrated? He says, because I went up to the CEO, who was a very well-known in the public, very well-known CEO. Very, marketing line and stuff like that. And he went up to him and during the coffee break and he said, Mr. So-and-so, it's me, your portfolio manager. Do you mind if I discuss a couple portfolio issues with you?
Yeah,
and you know what he said to him? He kind of did this and said, leave me alone with that operational crap.
Yeah, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
And you know what? That's reality. Yeah. I think we have we're passionately in love with our subject matter. We understand it and believe in it, but we have to have patience and understanding that not everybody else is going to agree with us.
Yeah. Because selling all of this is not something that we'll do pushing. People should be open for that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it requests a specific strategy. And what you said is important because, look, I'm a PMO leader. I have to deal with people from IT and people from accounting department. I'm talking about two different types of people. I have to talk with...
Different language.
Absolutely. Operational person and executives. Different kind of people. I have to talk with someone from Austria and someone from Brazil. Different kind of people, right? So we are much more emotional, right? so that's it, And if you just don't recognize this, you don't see the risks of your PMO. And this is the point. Sometimes we miss the risks that we have at our PMO in terms of reaching success. Yeah. This is the point.
Yeah. One of your roles will be to kind of be in touch with the feeling in the market, right? What's going on. And I think we would agree that there's a huge future for PMOs. I think there's still a lot that can be done, a lot of good things, because I think you mentioned this in your presentation yesterday. In our world, in our small world of PMO, which is much bigger than we think, we're always focused on the top tier. People who already embrace our language and our understanding, our vocabulary. It's kind of our own workforce. But the number of companies out there who need a PMO in some form or fashion, who don't know anything about PMI, who don't know anything about about you, and they definitely don't know anything about me. That's the future, and I think once again I think the initiative that you're doing is spot on. I think there's a lot of great things. On the other hand, I see or sense also. I know a lot of companies who've been committed to the PMO concept for 20, maybe even 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I see what I like to call a little bit of a drag, a little bit of there's been an evolution within the company, the market has been changing a little bit. I still think there's a huge value for PMO, but I see a lot of companies or new board members, because that's also the problem. It's great, you mentioned beforehand, it's great to have an accountable executive or senior manager sponsor for PMOs.
Of course,
it would be an ideal situation. but I've noticed in a lot of global companies, senior vice presidents, who are often these people, it's like musical chairs. I mean, some of them last 6 months before they get promoted or moved somewhere else. I'm like, how can you create a certain continuity? Because a lot of the objectives that a PMO might strive for can't be achieved in a year. A roadmap is sometimes several years, right? To deliver outcome or strategy.
This value journey. Yeah.
So I see a lot of companies, and my heart bleeds when I see it. I won't name any names. These are companies I know well and I love them. Big companies that are starting, and this is where the signs are. They'll start changing the name of the PMO. So I'll come and say, "Where's your PMO?" And they go, "Well, we don't have a PMO." And then I'll start asking, "What else? What do you have?" And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, "What does this and who does that?" "Oh, that's our Department of Business Excellence." Or I had one company that said, "Yeah, that's our we have a company, it's the department called OPEX." I said, "Operational expenditures?" No, operational excellence. The same thing is happening in change management.
Absolutely.
You know, just like change management used to be process engineering, process management, then process engineering, then Six Sigma, then Lean. It seems like every 5 to 10 years, we're doing the same thing. We're just calling it different, which is kind of confusing. What do you think is the reason why some PMOs struggle over a length of time to maintain not their relevance, but the perception of relevance?
Right. So first of all, regarding the idea of names, there are so many possibilities, right? And that's why in the guide we found a very simple definition. Because if I ask our audience, right, what's the definition of PMO? Maybe some of you will say, "Oh, PMOs are responsible for providing methodologies and tools."
The classical PMI model, service, control,
something like that.
And directive.
Or I will provide,
which is very limiting.
I will support portfolio management, or I will provide project managers for business areas. And okay, all of these things are talking about what you can do, but not what you are.
Yeah.
Every PMO in the world, they are a specific area that is centralizing something related to project, program, and portfolio management. All of them, sometimes one of them.
For those things,
You know, so what are they doing? I don't know, because it depends on the needs, the customers, right? So, but you are a PMO, even if you don't call yourself as a PMO. So the name, there are many trendy names, cool names, right? You can choose what you want.
You paint the house new. Yeah, it's still the same house, but it's different colors.
Exactly, but don't do something just because that name tells you that you have to do that. What you are doing as a PMO, the services, they should be designed because you have some value to deliver. You know, so it will be different from company to company. And the name, you can, make your decision about that. It's not a big deal. But the point is, why some PMOs start very well and then things become stale, challenging, right? I could say. There are many reasons for that. Actually, one of the most common reasons is a lack of alignment or a lack of maturity, right? It's like, okay, we are starting what we have to do. We understood your needs. We are doing the right thing, but we are doing in a very bad way. So I'm promised that I'm going to deliver something to you, but I just can't. And sooner or later, people see that, especially those that are paying the bills. This is the first thing. So you are not evolving your PMO. The second one, that is the most common one, that is a lack of alignment. You are doing what you believe that a PMO should do. I don't know why. Maybe because of your experience. Maybe
because nobody's
someone
telling
told you. Nobody told you.
It's a free playground.
You read an article, a book, and or you took one of these names, and that model tells you what you have to do. So you are believing that someone else that doesn't know you can tell you what you have to do. It doesn't make sense. But okay, that's what you are doing. So it's like you are providing maybe great medicines for pains that don't exist, right? So no value, no perception of value, and things go really bad in the medium and the long term. So This lack of ability of the PMO to understand the situation, I believe it's the most important point. You know, if you believe too much on what you are doing, even when things are showing you, the situation showing you the evidence that you are not in the right path, you should do something about that. And the big point here is you have to keep your mind open, right? So differently from project managers that, okay, tell me what you want and I'm going to deliver it. That's the job, right? PMO people, we have something before that is designing solutions. It's not only about deploying them, it's designing solutions. So design a solution means I need to understand you. Before giving you answers, I have to ask you questions, So this is the spirit.
Yeah. You're alluding to something where I want to deep dive on a little bit later, but I want to double down on the subject matter. I'm going to tell you what one of my passionate discussions that I repeat myself a million times. Sometimes I wonder if I just listen to myself. But when people ask me why I'm so passionate about PMOs, is because I'm in love with projects. I've always been in love with projects, but projects have a one big flaw, and that is the concept of a beginning and an end. Which is, there's a justification and it's understandable, but the spirit and the design or the system behind the project is not something that should begin and end. It has a longer life cycle, right? So we kind of extend the life cycle through programs, and then we have the portfolio concept. Absolutely. I love the portfolio concept, but this is one of my pet peeves with PMI as well. I mean, and yes, the PMBOK, you said yesterday the PMBOK guide is 300 pages. It's still 700, 800 pages because you have to put those 2 books or 3 books together. Hopefully they finally put it back together because it's annoying to run around with 3 books. But if you look at the standard for program management and portfolio management, I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like this. Now I can understand, I'm not judging in the sense that I don't understand how complex it is to actually write something and where do you start and how do you create the framework. But what my pet peeve is, people who want to understand, you're not going to get what you need from this, right? Which is also not the purpose of it, but maybe it should be. I often say why I think PMOs are so important, and there's many different types, operational PMOs, and some of them are some project offices. There used to be a difference between project office and PMOs. People kind of lump that together. And then there's strategic PMOs, regional PMOs, executive PMOs, and then you might have a portfolio man. One of the things that I think is one of the higher service possibilities because I think what we're going for here is this discussion, why do board members still not appreciate what I call the gray workforce? My term for the gray workforce is the unseen people.
I understand.
I recently went to a concert and the sound engineer had a great t-shirt. We should have it for PMOs. And it said on it, sound engineer. You don't know what I do until I stop doing it. Right? And that's what we're talking about, perception of value. The problem with PMOs, a lot of people won't see what they did even after they're gone, and that is a problem.
Absolutely.
So this is when I talk to executives and I'm trying to tease them that they need to, open up and maybe listen to our culture and language a little bit. I say, listen, how many projects do you have in your organization? How many of them are external? Okay, is the project process part of your service delivery package where I can't sell my product for Quentis, for example. You can't just send the stuff in a box. You have to install it. You have to have professionals who show you and teach you, right? Yeah. And is that also an extension of your business model? And the answer might be yes, 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 yes. And then but the question is, how many projects do you have in your portfolio? I'll often get,
sometimes they just don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I said, and what I'm in love with is, for example, for me, portfolio is not one portfolio. Portfolio is a word that we borrowed from finance. So there's financial portfolios, then there's product portfolios, and then there's project portfolios. And I call it the holy trinity of portfolios. Yeah. Now, this is not the only thing that PMOs could theoretically be possible. But to get back to I think, and I agree with you, I think one of the reasons why more board members are not cognizant and see value in PMOs is because they don't really know what I do. And I think PMI's very refreshing attitude, and I also heard it in your presentation yesterday, and you kind of alluded to it previously, is if you're providing the patient with a medicine where they don't know why and what in what it's doing for them, it can bring all sorts of value, but if the perception is not there, there's no value delivery. You want to kind of tell us a little bit about what you guys are trying to do, or what your philosophy is in how do you engage executives, the C-suite more, and how's that going to work maybe with value delivery?
Yeah. What we observed, the most important point is we have to speak their language, right? And we cannot assume that it's important for them what is important for us. You said that your wife is a doctor. I'm sure that when she has a patient and she said, okay, I'm going to prescribe this specific medicine, if she would be really happy to tell all the details, this medicine is good because of this, because of that, the collateral effects,
Side effects,
But she doesn't do that. There is a reason, right? Because it's not needed.
Yeah.
Okay? And why? Because there is a trust-based relationship. This is the idea, right? So the point is, sometimes, because we love what we do, we want to share, right? But we have to focus on what really matters. And what really matters is usually connected with the language of our customer, what they really need to know. Because other aspects, maybe they are important for us because we want to say, hey, look how complex it is, look the great job that I'm doing, because the outcome is something so simple that looks like, okay, in 2 hours I could do that. And we know that we spend 3 weeks, right? But it's not about that. It's about how they trust us and how we are really giving them what they need in a language that they can understand, And of course, this understanding will be, will increase over time because they will mature, right? But it's not about what we are doing. It's about what we are generating for them as a result. So that's how I see that. But there is something important. We have many possibilities, of customers. So let's suppose that in my company we have 500 project managers, right? Of course, I cannot treat each one in a different way. It will be very difficult. But you will always have a specific group of customers that will be very important for you, usually someone in the executive level. And these people, sometimes you have to establish a specific strategy for each one. Because this guy, for example, he came from another company where he had a very bad experience with a PMO, and he has a lot of traumas. When you talk about PMO with him, PMO is not a good idea. It's a specific
Time to change
strategy.
the word.
It's a specific strategy,
Yeah.
There is another one that is a very technical guy that came from, the technical area, and he loves to know the details.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. This one is a traditional executive, tell me what you have, the outcomes, it's enough. I want to see things just working well. It's another approach. So recognizing that we need to establish our services, and sometimes we have to adapt the way that we are doing that for each group of customer or each different type of customer. It's very, very important. Even when we have a group, imagine functional managers. Okay, but we have some functional managers like accounting, marketing, that they know almost anything about our world. It's one approach. But I have some people from maintenance, from engineering, from IT that will be something different because they are more mature. So thinking about all of this is important. You'll never find a template that will meet what you need.
You're talking about a very powerful concept that I think might be confusing, because we tend to use the one word, PMO, right? And what you're alluding to is the fact, what kind of, who's the client, right? Is it in a factory that has 15 ongoing projects? You have a PMO that basically helps coordinate resources, provide training, coach.
And it's okay.
Maybe some scrum masters if that's what they're doing. Then you might have a regional one that's responsible for multiple factories, for a business unit. You might have a business unit PMO. I'm not saying that this is the recipe, but I'm talking about context. And then I think a lot of us are in love with the concept. Yeah, but what does a PMO do for the board? And quite honestly, there's a lot of things to do before you even get to the board.
And this is something that is totally okay.
Yeah.
Many people believe that, every single PMO in the earth should become very strategic. No, it depends on your mission. Why were you created for? There will be PMOs that they will be more tactical and operational because that's their mission. And it's okay. You can be very mature doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes people make a confusion between being strategic and being mature.
Yeah.
Being strategic is a matter of alignment. You tell me that you have strategic pains, I will provide you strategic services, but if I'm doing that very well or not, that is about maturity, I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe you can be very strategic, I'm supporting the portfolio, but doing something that you should be ashamed of. No maturity, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So being mature, being strategic, tactical, or operational is about alignment.
Yeah.
And the way that you are doing things is about maturity. But maybe I can give you an example. Recently, I was visiting a company that they have a structure with more than one PMO. So actually, they have a core enterprise PMO that I could say that is more strategic, most of the services, but they have some specific PMOs on engineering and IT, and they are tactical and operational. Yeah. For example, recently I was with a big company, and they have a structure that they have more than one PMO, right? So they have an enterprise PMO that is more focused on the strategic pains, right? Support to portfolio management. But they also have some PMOs in IT, one in engineering area. Yeah. And they are tactical and operational. Yeah. And it's okay. And they are doing a great job, right? So don't feel bad because, I will never be strategic with the board. It's your job, right? And you are doing a great job. So the idea, of course, it's true that when you are generating value on the strategic level, of course, the impact is much more visible, especially for the executive level. Yeah. So that's why we say that PMOs can do that, can generate this kind of value. It's something important. But it doesn't mean that this is the solution for any company.
Yeah, I think what helps one conceptually to understand the different flavors of PMOs, if you're talking about ice cream, for example, is if you look at the pyramid and the different, vertical roles and functions of an organization, PMOs can be of help on many of these different levels.
Absolutely.
If it's on an executive level, if it's on a business unit level, if it's on a unit level, if it's so operationally or strategic or tactical, I think that's important. But I think you talked about this yesterday in your presentation a little bit. I guess one danger, and this goes back to the perception of value, is in a time when people are a little bit uncomfortable about the economy and stuff like that, there's a temptation to say, okay, what am I going to cut away, right? And I think the example usually, nobody's going to cut away the accounting department because you need them, right? But with things like project management or PMOs, what we do is still a mystery to a lot of people. Everybody uses the word inflationary project. Some people use the word project manager, but if you ask them any kind of details, you quickly reach a point where they're like, I don't know, which is okay. I'm not judging. What would you, if you, I'm going to put you on a spot a little bit, but you're an actor, maybe you'll ad-lib here a little bit. If I've got a C-suite executive listening or watching this podcast, and they say, okay, I'm in that position, I need to cut costs, and I don't know what the heck my PMO. What would be your short pitch to an executive to explain to them the importance of PMO?
Yeah. First of all, you need to think about the importance of projects for you, because we know that they can be important, but we know that we're talking about different companies. There will be companies that will be very project-oriented. There are other companies that they are process-oriented, production, operations. But projects are important because they are capital projects, for example. So what is the relevance of projects for you? This is the first thing. There is something that I've been a consultant for 20 years, and every single new meeting with a new customer, I usually ask, what is project for you? It looks very basic, but there are many companies, big companies, that they don't have an answer for that, right? This is so maybe the first understanding, and then, okay, how much relevant they are for us. So, because if you don't feel that you have a problem, you don't need a solution. That's simple like that, right? And sometimes you have a problem, but you can't see that, as I said, you are a child, right? So you don't know that you don't know. The next stage is, now I know that I don't know, but sometimes you are in the first stage. So the point is, okay, we recognize that there is a problem, there is something that is a challenge for us. Now we need to find a solution. PMOs are not for everyone. It means that if there is no relevance in terms of projects, if you are too small in terms of company, there will be probably...
If your projects are repetitive and almost close to the line...
Yeah, in a certain way,
depending
on the relevance. Yeah. Exactly. There will be always projects, but that idea that everything is a project, I don't know, in my opinion, is too much. And for like small companies, even medium-sized companies, you have to think about the impact of the failure of your projects in your business, and if it makes sense or not. Because sometimes, okay, the PMO will save some money, but what you will spend with the PMO, even one person annually, it's more than what you can save, you know what I'm saying? So it doesn't make sense. So you need to understand this, if it's something really relevant for you. And then creating something that can fit to your specific needs at that moment. And the person that is doing that should understand that is a value journey, and we need to establish a strategy. So in the first year, considering the scenario, that's what we will do. These customers will be the priority. We have a pilot. We will try to bring those people that are in the beginning of our adoption curve, because they will give us support for the next cycle. In the second year, that's what we'll do, the third year, because it's a perennial PMO, right? So thinking about these things and not thinking only about what I'm going to do right now, it's necessary, but this is not the game. The game is, how can I become a trust-based partner? This is the point. And it requests planning.
I think, and that kind of came out in your presentation. I loved your presentation. It was a long presentation, but I was sitting on the edge of my seat. It wasn't a criticism. I know for some people, they were like, oh my God, this is... there was one person in the front that asked you that question. He says, you were looking at this wonderful graphic. Maybe we can show it, the framework, which I thought was... I was like, wow. But once I started looking at it, I could definitely... I was on board. And one of these things, he tried to nail you down. He was almost talking like an executive. He says, you know what, you've given me 12 points here. That's too long give me one. And you were like, why? I love that answer. I think one of the biggest challenges that PMOs have with executives is what I call ADD, attention deficit disorder, which I'm not judging, okay? If you look at an executive and how many, I was going to pass this on to you as a suggestion. I'm sure you've been to the circus and you've seen plate jugglers. Ones with the sticks? I often feel that a PMO or a portfolio manager is like that. Or an executive is like that, right? You got plenty of plates and one is wobbling and you have to do this and you focus on, and you're kind of erratic, right? So I think one of the challenges the executives have is that we have compiled such a large framework of cause and effect and explanations and philosophies for what we do. Most executives look at us and their fuse burns through.
True.
Right?
True.
And when I train people to speak in the language of executives, I ask them, what are the two main priorities of an executive?
Yeah.
They look at me just like if you had asked, what's the main two priorities of a PMO? An executive would say, I wouldn't know. And I said, let me put it, these are their pains. They are judged on an annual basis for their fiscal value. Okay? It's a quantitative, Machiavellian, hardcore power play. What is the company worth today, and what is it worth in 1 year from now? And if you're not increasing the value, you're gone. Which creates huge pressure. Shareholder value creates huge pressure because you sometimes sacrifice midterm, long term for the short term, which can be a nightmare, right?
No.
And the second thing, so that's a very mathematical quantitative. And the second thing is almost ethereal, esoteric. And a lot of executives are not even aware of this. And the simplest word, a beautiful word, is vision.
I agree.
Everybody feels the word vision, but I said, do you actually understand what an emotional, psychological terror vision is? You know what vision is? Vision is in the absence of certainty, what will come in the future because of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. To put your foot down with conviction and say, this is the way we're going.
Yeah.
It's almost a psychopathic quality.
Absolutely. And it brings trust.
Yes.
So everything connects.
Yeah. And if you cannot translate your effort into those two languages, what's the bottom line? If I was, I always shock project managers. I love to do financial management with them, and they always like start leaning in their chairs and they start huffing and puffing when I talk about internal rate of return or net present value. They're like, ugh. I'm like, you got to know this, and these are they're not difficult words if you look behind the curtain.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you can't speak in that language, you don't have attention, and if you can't be brief in what you're saying, and I think that's our biggest challenge as PMO advocates is how can we say the wonderful, beautiful things that we say, but in a way that maybe the person doesn't know all the details that we then know, but emotionally they're on board.
Yes.
I think that's the big challenge.
Yeah, and this is something interesting, and it's connected with something that we talked a few moments ago. The point is, we have two aspects. What we are saying and how we are saying that, right? But again, everything should be planned based on a strategy. I'm going to give you a real example. A few time ago, I was talking with a PMO leader, and he was very frustrated because they started to implement a new tool. They spent a lot of money with the tool, and the PMO, everyone in the PMO, they were very excited, and they said, oh, now we will train everyone, and the tool.
The enterprise
exactly,
master tool.
because, and they spend a lot of time training everyone in the company in everything, even those things that people won't use.
Yeah.
And why? Because they were so excited. Look how cool it is, And
it's like explaining to a 3-year-old how cool the Ferrari is.
Exactly. And many of those people, they should press a button. You know what I'm saying? And now they see that as, oh my gosh, look all of this. It's very complicated.
It's intimidating.
And it created a lot of resistance. Yeah. So yesterday, for example, when that question came up, we had 10 steps, and we were a group of PMO professionals, right? So the proper answer, my point of view, for if we have to take one, which one we would take of these 10 steps, my answer is, why should we take one? All of them are important. Okay, you can maybe be less sophisticated in some of these steps. You can skip them because you say, okay, I analyzed this step and I don't need it. It's okay. But you cannot just say, oh, tell me the one that I should pick. Yeah. Because what's the logic behind that? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? However, if you are speaking with the executives, for example, right, of course that you won't present that for them. Again, they don't care and they don't know what you are talking about. Yeah. So they will never ask you to take one, but let's suppose that they ask you, take one. Okay, which one will you take? It's number one. Does it mean that you will abandon all of them? No, because it's an internal job. You know what I'm saying? They don't know about that. So we have to adapt our language to make people understand what we need to say. You know?
We don't have the possibility with great detail to show that, but what we're talking about is just kind of so you see it. Well, maybe we'll put a link.
Flywheel.
The flywheel. And the reason I want to show it because I really took some. It resonated with because it gave me a different understanding and explained some of the thoughts that I had in my mind, which I think is what we love about sharing, right? And these 10 steps are awareness building, needs assessment, value proposition, service development, service onboarding, service operation, service monitoring, service improvement, value delivery, and value recognition. Now, for a person who looks at this the first time, they're going to do the number one flaw that we often do in management. This is sequential. This is in a row. It's a checklist. I do one, it's finished. I do the next, and I'll streamline it, do a value chain analysis or a network diagram, and we'll have the fastest critical path.
Yeah.
And which also kind of ties into this question: Can I fast track this by just doing one? What's the most important? And you said. You have to understand the context in you're doing it. And what I loved about what you said yesterday also is it's this plate juggling. You're not doing one plate, stopping, doing the next plate, stopping.
Exactly. It looks like a sequence, but in fact...
You're continually onboarding.
Exactly. All the time, you know, especially after the second cycle. You know, when you already have a PMO, you are doing all of this simultaneously. And so it's a sequence to make things a little more clear, but this is the spirit.
I'm definitely going to do some follow-up on this. I'm going to have to kind of brainstorm on how we're going to do it. But I'm going to do whatever I can to promote this because I think this is a great model. I think one of the biggest challenges we also have in PMO is there's so many ideas out there, but if there's not a common language or common framework that can be improved.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just makes, if you don't have a language for your feelings, then your feelings don't matter.
I
right?
totally
agree. So that's kind of
totally agree.
That's kind of
and that's what I told you in the very beginning. For example, if we take one of these steps, value proposition, there will be many standards, many books that they will have their own value proposition. What we are saying is, hey, think about that. You have to find yours, right? You can take one of them. I don't believe it's the good way. You can learn about them and create yours. So that's why we connect with all of these things, you know, because actually they can bring you inspiration, but not a solution. Only you will be able to create your own solution.
I'm going to do something crazy. Hold on just a second. Wait. I'm going to be right back because I want to. This is a great lead-in, a good segue. Invincible company.
Yes. This is the one that we are using now.
Ready? Okay. What we often like to do in our podcast is ask for book recommendations. We're going to put it into the flow, though. We're not going to make it as a separate chapter. We're going to kind of tie it into the conversation. We're talking about how do we make other people fall in love with what we do and understand that we deliver value? How do we create longevity by addressing people? And I was so thrilled because I'm a big fan of these books, right? And I think they're a great addition to our medicine kit of what PMOs can do to have a better understanding of what they can be, right? And you mentioned two books, and I have them on my shelf. I've read one several times. The other one I'm going to read. I've had it for a while. The first one is The Business Model Generation.
This one is very famous.
By the way, I love this book because it is a wonderful blend between, it looks like a children's book because it's got a lot of pictures, but there's some really heavy, really
it's simple,
intelligent comments in here, like different models
powerful.
that you can look, which also addresses the fact that there's not one business model, there's several business models. And this is a book that you recommended, and I also recommend. I adapted a little. By the way, I also agree. You can take something and say, well, I would use a different word or maybe ask a different question.
And you can use that to create a strategy of your PMO.
Yes. So this is also my number one recommendation, and we don't get paid for this, but you can send me a couple copies. Why reinvent the wheel? Use simple. It's graphic. In the middle here somewhere, they've got this classical thing, which is a good guideline for you doing a workshop with yourself or with somebody else to create your business model, right? And this is basically the master template behind it. The book that I definitely going to put on my list to read that I've had for a while, but I haven't gotten around to it, is The Value Proposition, right?
This one is the
Tell
one
us a
that
little
we
bit
are,
about that and why you think this is a great tool for PMOs.
All right. So actually the first one, because in the framework, we have one layer that talks about the PMO strategy, right? And the first one is very useful to create this strategy. It can help you.
Strategy is an ambiguous word, but it breaks it down into the elements.
Many items.
Who are your different stakeholders or clients? What is your value proposition? Who do you need? It's understandable. It's tangible.
Absolutely. And that's what I said. You can start only with this.
Yeah.
Later, you can try to make something more sophisticated, more detailed. But anyway, that's a very good beginning. The second one, value proposition design, is about one of the steps of the flywheel, value proposition, step number 3. Well, I'm a very practical person in many different ways.
I call myself pragmatic. It's my version.
Sometimes skeptical, right? But the point is, of course, we need to find ways of doing what we have to do. And there are many contributions in other areas of knowledge that can inspire us. And this is a very interesting book. Basically, the idea is how you create the value proposition. The value proposition is part of the canvas that is proposed in the previous book. So the value proposition is a kind of the tail of your strategy, where in one side you have the business, the service provider, the PMO, right? And on the other side you have your customer. And everything is based on the idea of pains, solutions for those pains, how you make them operational through things that you will do, and then some other details. So it can help you on defining the value proposition. That means, okay, I understand the pains, step 2, the step before, value proposition, and now I will create the solutions. I will prescribe the medicines, right? It means that I will tell you which kind of services I will provide, in which way. This is something very cool that we have in the new guide, because for many years we saw many people talking about something like directive PMO, support PMO, even in the PMBOK, or consultative PMO.
I've yet to see a directive one, though, but that's a different story,
But we realized something really interesting. When we say a directive PMO, it looks like the PMO will be directive all the time, and all the time with every customer. It's not like that. Actually, depending on who your customer is, and depending on the service that you are providing, you can provide this service to this customer in a more directive way, in a more supportive way, in a more controlling way. What will define that is the maturity of your customer. Because if they are not very mature, you'll be to be more controlling. If they are very mature, okay, I'm going to give you some directions you can do by yourself. So there is no directive PMO. Actually, you have customers, you have services, and you can have a mix. Sometimes for these customers, accounting people, I will be more controlling. But IT, okay, they are more mature, I will be more directive, So you can be everything at the same time. It's really interesting.
You used the term yesterday, SLA, right?
Yeah.
Service level agreement, which I think a lot of people that maybe are not ready for the more advanced car will say, "Oh, time out, that's too technical for me." But it's an old concept for an old need, So maybe tell us a little bit about the concept of a service level agreement, how that can help.
Actually, it's your commitment.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, I will provide mentoring to you.
Mm-hmm.
Our commitment is providing mentoring means that every time that we have different ways of doing that. For example, we see that there is a project with a problem, right? And we have someone that has not a lot of experience managing this project. So you don't need to request anything. It's automatic, right? You will be called to be mentored. Or it can be something by request. So people can ask the PMO, could you mentor me in this specific topic? 2 ways of doing that. So it's about service development. And we have to agree how we will do that.
Yeah.
You know, so, okay, can you just call me anytime? No, actually, I can provide you 5 hours every month. You know, oh, but I need 10. Okay, so let's see what we can do. If we can provide someone external, someone, you know, but this is my commitment with you, and it's part of the perception of value.
What's so refreshing about what you're saying, and it kind of ties into the first book we talked about, is stop thinking as a PMO, and you mentioned this in an off-screen conversation. One of the big things that gets in our way is this hierarchical thinking. You know, I have to live my position, I have to act a certain way, and you're like, no, act the way your position, noblesse oblige, right?
Yeah.
We're servant leaders, and PMOs. What I like about the value, the business model thing is look at the people that you interact with not as your employees, but as your clients.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are their needs? And taking it one step further and saying, well, let me ask you what you need. I probably have an idea what you need, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to ask you. What do you have? Do you have a headache? Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, you know, ask a couple questions and onboard them and say, well, listen, what if I provide this service to you? It creates a whole different feeling in the relationship, and it creates a whole other level of onboarding and engagement.
Absolutely, and see, the focus is on people, not on the technique.
Yeah.
And sometimes a solution for one customer can create problems for another customer. For example, okay, you have to meet some specific need of control that you found with the executives. It means that you have to control someone else, you know, the project managers, for example, and they will feel upset with that.
Yeah.
How can you manage this?
Yeah.
You know, it's a kind of conflict that you have to manage because you need to establish trust-based relationships with everyone. So this is one of the challenges, you know. And of course, in each company, the solution will be different. Yeah. But all of these things are connected.
One of the things that I think is an emotional strain for selling something that people actually want, this service level agreement, is that when you're talking about a service level agreement, in a lot of companies, we have this principle which I call Peter paying Paul. Mm-hmm. I have money in this pocket and I take it out and I put it in this pocket, but it's still in the same pants and it still belongs to the same person. What I'm saying is that a lot of PMOs find themselves in a position as a staff position that they have to account for their FTEs, right? So in their service levels agreement, they say, well, if I provide you with 5 hours, then I will bill internally. It's basically accounting.
It's like a shared service.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Honestly, I don't see that frequently, right? So in theory, it makes a lot of sense, but I don't see it frequently. I couldn't tell you that it's a partner for success.
So I think from an accounting, I agree. I don't agree. My experience in a couple companies, I've seen it in a couple actually.
Yeah.
I think it dampens the spirit more than it helps.
Yeah, I've seen that in many other areas. You know, like shared services, traditional shared services. It's very common, but at PMOs, really, I can't tell you. You know, maybe 1 or 2 companies that I saw something like that. And this is a very good point because, again, I'm talking about an SLA, right? What would it be for you? It can be half a page, right? It can be 5 pages. It depends on what you want. You can keep things very simple, especially in the beginning. What we are talking about with SLA is you need to establish some commitment. For example, we are creating a new methodology, right? It's obvious that in the 6 first months, the adoption rate will be low.
Yeah.
I need to align
Not if we
it.
can help
You
it.
know, and I need to align it with you, because otherwise, maybe you will have the expectation that everyone will be using the methodology in the next month.
Actually, quite honestly, I'd be happy if they get it and look at it first stage, right?
So this is the point. It's about alignment of expectations.
Yeah, it's the awareness, step number one. We want to create awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
This practice guide is out already. I know.
Yes.
It's available on the PMI website.
Exactly.
Is it on Amazon already?
Members, no. For now,
Okay.
only on the website. Members
In a
can
physical
download.
or digital form?
For now, digital, but it will be available. Hard copies will be available in a couple of months, and also today it's only in English. But by the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter, it will be available in 10 languages.
Yeah. Well,
So-
AI makes things a lot quicker too.
Yes, it helps a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things. I've taken a look at it already. I'm still in the process of digesting it, but I've seen a lot of attempts at standards. I told you this beforehand, where I'm like, are you kidding me? I could write this on a weekend if I was after a couple bottles of wine, and it wouldn't be much worse. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but like I said, I think if we're going to address the PMO community, these are all high professionals. You need to cover more than just basics. It needs to be, and you guys have made a sensational start. Now, before we get to the next topic, which we talked off camera for just a moment, you said something funny yesterday. You said the PMBOK is revised every 4 years, right?
True, and our plan is to update this material every year.
Yeah.
You know?
So you said you don't want to do it as complex as PMI. That's why you're doing it every. Which is like,
it's not easy, but we are trying.
Is it through the digital process that you want to do that?
Yeah, actually, there are some difficulties, and for example, if we start to provide hard copies, and every year you have something new, it's a little difficult,
Logistic thing,
So and even translations, so everything becomes a little difficult. That's why I told you that maybe instead of updating the main guide, we can have the extensions, because the extensions, they will be only digital, and they are more flexible, so we can have a specific extension on value proposition design, a specific extension about sustainability and PMOs and how these things connect, So I believe this is the plan for the next few months. So, but also some updates will be required, no doubt.
Actually, this resonates with me as well. I hadn't thought of it, but now that you're talking, it makes a lot of sense, because I'm assuming that you've got a bunch of project teams working on things all the time, and why do I have to wait on my segment until everybody else is ready? It makes it that's more of the traditional approach. This is more the agile approach, that you have continuous improvement of the thing, and the digital process would be.
Yes.
And it's easier to translate, and you bring out. And by the way, it's a good way to remind you, hey, we've added to this segment. So that's
it's feasible.
It's a great idea.
Of course, PMI is always very concerned about the quality, so we are talking about an official guide. So we cannot rely on AI, for example, only to translate.
No, you never can.
So it's more complicated than I would love that it could be. But anyway, we can be much more agile in this process.
I think that's a good approach.
Yeah.
You were mentioning beforehand and off camera, when we were talking about the value delivery, that you have many interesting chapters, but one chapter that deals with that. Would you care to share that with us?
Because in the flywheel, that is a kind of cycle, there is something new that we brought from the feedback that we received with the previous methodology for years, that is about the two last steps. They are connected with that idea of value that we discussed previously. But we divided this value perspective in two steps. The first step is value delivery, and the second step is value recognition.
This is you mentioned this. Yes, I love this part. Yeah,
and it's something that looks like just a small detail, but it's not. Definitely not. It's very critical, because value delivery is something tangible. You will show that you you are delivering what you promised, right? Value recognition is about how your customer recognize that their pain was healed. In a logical perspective, you say, okay, if I deliver tangible outcomes, obviously the pain, no longer exists. But it's not like that. Yeah. There are many reasons that can lead a kind of lack of recognition, even a lack of maturity. So if you tell me that your pain is, you cannot make a decision because you don't see connection between projects and the strategy, maybe in project delivery, I will show you the map. Look, now the map, everything is connected. I deliver the value, the outcome that I promised. Now you have everything connected, and then you can make a decision. But if I ask you, do you feel more comfortable to make a decision now? Maybe you say, not really. Why? Let's see. Maybe because you can't interpret that map. Yeah. So there will be some reasons, but these things are different because perception of value is what we have after value recognition or with value recognition.
I think there's so many other tangents off that which are important. I think one of the big things that a lot of companies and people that are working on projects still have to digest partly conceptually is that we deliver three different things. Well, we deliver an output first and foremost. The very nature of a project having a beginning and an end, project managers create outputs.
Yeah, true.
And nobody cares about those outputs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You might spend $10 million on an expensive IT system. Nobody knows how it works. And so why are you spending that much money? Because I expect an outcome.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And when we work with these concepts, we have outputs, we have outcomes, we have benefits, and we have value.
Oh, you separate those two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they are very separate.
I use the concept of output, outcome, and an impact, which I like.
Because
the impact.
Output usually is something very tangible. Outcome is your expectation. Benefit is, okay, you are doing something with that, so now I can make a decision, So the outcome is there, is the map, but now I can make a decision. Yeah. And then the value is, okay, it's worth it, so we spend months and months, many people, now you make a decision, but okay, it's something that really worth it. So that's the big question.
Excellent. Tied into all of this, and I'm already conceptually gearing up for it, you have certification. Tell us a little bit about the certification process.
Yeah, we had a legacy certification named PMO CP, PMO Certified Practitioner.
The original gangster.
The original one, right?
The OGs.
Yeah, that was created by PMOGA years ago. It was great. But in the last year, we started to develop a new certification that is named PMI PMO CP, and now P instead of practitioner means professional. So this certification is a gold standard certification for PMI, so it's aligned with all the best practices, and it's ISO certified. So there is a new exam, a new number of questions, and everything is grounded on the PMO Practice Guide. So situational questions, right? And you are supposed to respond them, not with the information that you find in the guide, but with the mindset that you find in the guide. That's the idea.
What are the requirements for?
You need 3 years of experience in projects, not as a PMO necessarily, right? So you need to know what we're talking about, right? Because we have some people now, in the past, there were many people that they migrated from the project management role to the PMO role. But now we have a lot of people that they are starting as a PMO, not as a leader, but as a PMO member. And that's why we have a specific chapter about PMO competences, because it's a different framework. It's not the one for project managers. So, but this is one of the needs. The next one is 10 hours of some kind of training on PMOs, not necessarily a prep course. There is a prep course available online at pmi.org, but it's any PMO training, right? 10 hours. And what else? By the way, 3 years of experience or a PMP.
Okay.
Right? and that you should be approved in the exam.
Good.
Basically, those are the
Good,
most
good.
important. But people can find all
my,
of them.
It's on my to-do list for this year.
To be honest, I'm not really good to memorize this kind of stuff.
That's good,
So
that's good.
to go to the website and check it by yourself.
I have to be a little bit aware of our time schedule because you've got a flight to catch.
Oh yeah, I'm going to
I want to
Paris.
say up front again, thank you so much for being here. We have a tradition with our film crew that we give them the opportunity. This is our captive audience that has to listen to us to ask any questions that they might have. Nelly, do you have any questions you want to ask? No? Rico?
I have one question. So you have I will say, a history of experience in this sector. Can you see or recognize that something changed in the how I can say in the culture of can you?
I understand that. Definitely. Actually, PMOs are not something new, right? There are PMOs since the 70s, last century. So, but they are back in a different way, right? And why? Because they are still PMOs because they are centralizing those functions related to project, programs, and portfolios, but in a different way, with a different perspective, with a different commitment, and that's the point. So PMOs are becoming customer-centric PMOs, driven by the need of generating value. That's the idea.
I think a lot of people who've been around for a long time might say, hey, has anything really changed? It's just more of the same stuff. I think there's some validity to that, but I think this is and going back to your question of change in culture and evolution, and you mentioned this yesterday in your presentation, this is not a fixed target. This is a process.
Exactly.
Maturity is not something you reach and that it ends, right? Yeah. Alignment is not something that's static. It's something that you constantly have to strive for. It's an ongoing. And the good thing about that, it makes life interesting.
Absolutely.
And I often say, I think one of the reasons why some of the things are like revamped, maybe we put a new paint of color on the house is because it makes the house look nice. I think that's an important thing. And I think every new generation I think the new generation should learn from the old generation so they don't make the same mistakes. Although some of the mistakes are necessary for learning. And I think they have to make it their own. And if they have to rename the PMO for it to be more in line with them or put a different, change the couch or whatever it is in the house, that's... I've got a couple more questions I'm going to squeeze in before I let you go. AI, big issue, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what was in my mind. Actually, AI, I will say that it will change the game, not in terms of how the PMO will behave, in terms of being customer-centric, value-driven, but it will be really, really important to support PMO on making it happen, So I'm not talking only about automation, this is an important point, but especially about prediction.
Yeah.
So it's something very powerful. We already have many things available
today. Are you collecting
today.
best cases on that kind of stuff?
Actually, I'm working on this, but it's difficult because it's new for everyone.
Yeah.
We have many companies trying different things, but we are just the beginning of this process, So in the next few years, I believe we will evolve a lot. We are working on a specific extension, AI for PMOs.
I've got a guy I'll send you that might be of help.
Exactly. PMI Infinity today on PMI.org is the AI platform of PMI. All the guide is available there. So if you ask questions, it will respond to your questions based on the guide. But it's it's not a long journey because we don't have time for that, right? In 2-3 years, everything will be different. So it's not so long. But we need to keep our eye on this, especially because PMOs will be the ones that will address AI and projects in their organizations. No doubt about that.
Yeah. You're constantly on the go, flying all over the place. What are your next destinations?
Yeah. So today I'm going to Paris. Next month I will be in Italy, Saudi Arabia, Tanzania. There will be many.
Good. You'll be at the symposiums in Phoenix and
Barcelona, Phoenix. Yes.
Good.
And this is the moment, because, and this is very important to say before the end, is everything that we are talking about here, it's not my ideas, actually. It's powerful because it came from the community. It came from
I think it makes it more powerful that people can listen to you and say, you know what?
Yeah.
He's saying what I think.
Exactly.
He's putting into words.
You see yourself.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the point.
I'm gonna throw one more statement out at you for our close. There's a saying in German, tue Gutes und rede darüber, translated into English, do good things and talk about it, which is, I think, a simple version of talking about value delivery. We both believe, our whole community is behind it, that PMOs are value-generating, valuable institutions in whatever format that you might have them, whatever your maturity, whatever your context. But remember, with all the good work that you do, you shouldn't just do it in the gray background, but make sure that you don't forget to promote yourself a little bit. Would you agree?
Yeah, of course. Everything is part of this game, So that's why we give a lot of credits and credibility for everyone that is involved with us. So everyone is invited to get involved. You can be a volunteer. There are many great projects for people that are starting, people very experienced. So if you go to community.pmoga.org, you will find our online community where you can connect with people. You can find our regional hubs. We have one for Europe. So there are so many opportunities, and great minds can do great things,
Collaborative work.
Oh, yeah. I totally trust my life on this.
Yeah. Americo Pinto, thank you so much for taking time out of your
Thank you very
busy
much.
schedule to join us. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I look forward to the feedback we get on this.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure. Thank you very much.